planet Arakis is so beautiful when the sun is low. Rolling over the sands, you can see spice in the air. The outsiders ravage our lands in front of our eyes. Their cruelty to my people is all I've known. What's to become of our world? Paul.
A boy.
Hey, Duncan, can I trust you with something?
Yes, always. You know that.
I've been having dreams about a girl on Arakis. I don't know what it means.
Dreams make good stories. But everything important happens when we're awake. Hey, you. Put on some muscle?
I did?
No.
We are House Atreides. There is no call we do not answer. There is no faith that we betray.
Smile, Gurney. I am smiling.
The Emperor asks us to bring peace to Arakis. House Atreides accepts!
I know you. There's something awakening in my mind.
You need to face your fears.
Come with me. You need to be ready. I've never met Harkonnens before. They're not human, they're brutal.
The Duke's son sees too much.
This is my Dune. Kill them all. God in heaven.
Get everything with guns off the ground! Go!
This is an extermination. They're picking my family off one by one.
Let's fight like demons.
Dad, what if I'm not the future of House Atreides?
A great man doesn't seek to lead. He's called to it. But if your answer is no, you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be. My son. If anything happens, will you protect Paul?
With my life.
Only together can we stand a chance.
It's time.
Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my new Dune trailer video. They finally dropped the main regular trailer, even though we got one a long time ago last year. It seems like it's been 84 years since we've heard about this movie, but it's coming out October 22nd. Of course, I'll be doing videos for it, so be sure to subscribe to get everything. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs here, so we'll break it all down. The new trailer opens with Zendaya's Chani narrating as she's speaking to Paul Atreides in the visions that he's having. He talks about this later in the trailer, too. I've been having dreams about this girl on Arakis. The whole thing is that he doesn't realize that he's having visions of the future. He just thinks that they're dreams right now, early in the movie. The reason why they probably open with her during this is because you barely saw her in the last trailer. Because of the way they're pacing the story out between the first couple of movies, she's not in the first movie quite as much as she's in the second movie, but I'll explain in a second. If you know the story of Dune, if you watched that 1984 Dune movie, the David Lynch one, then you understand why she doesn't really become a big character till much later in the story. And the big difference in this new Dune movie is that they're basically breaking the first two books up, whereas the David Lynch movie combined the first two books and had to speed run the story. So they're just not speed running things quite as much during this new version of the film franchise. But when she's talking about outsiders ravaging Arakis for its spice, they're mostly showing you House Harkonnen's men in the Beast Raban attacking the Fremen and some of the attack from the betrayal later in the movie. They don't distinguish too much, but you get the idea. The Harkonnens have been ruling over Arakis and managing spice production for the Empire for a long time. So even though most of the massacre that you see play out over the course of the trailer is from the betrayal later in the movie, they've been doing stuff like this to the locals for a long time. The Baron basically gave control of the operation to the Beast Raban, and the Beast is an animal, played by Dave Bautista, as you can see. Very apt casting there. He's going to wreck everyone during the movie. But the way they cut the footage, Timothee Chalamet's Paul wakes up in bed on Caladan as if he's just heard Shawnee talking to him saying these things. He doesn't really gain the ability to actually see the future, perfect visions of the future, till later when he takes the Water of Life. Once he actually takes the Water of Life and becomes the Kwisatz Haderach, that's when he becomes the super being and he can see perfectly into the future. That might be around the time where they end the first movie with him taking the Water of Life and unlocking those powers. If you remember the original film, the sleeper has awakened. But even though he becomes the Kwisatz Haderach, if someone in the Sisterhood takes the Water of Life and it doesn't kill them, it unlocks perfect prescience and a bunch of other powers, like they gain full access to the entire genetic memory of thousands of years of the Sisterhood. So you kind of become this all-knowing, all-seeing person. But when members of the Sisterhood become Reverend Mothers, they also take the Water of Life. They don't become quite as powerful as Paul Atreides becomes because he's the product of this big genetic breeding program that's been going on for a long, long time. It gives them a fractional amount of the powers that Paul gets. But at the beginning of the movie here, they're still on House Atreides' former homeworld of Caladan, which is a very green, water-based planet in stark contrast to the deserts of Arakis. That's why the headboard on his bed is covered with all those fish. The funny foreshadowing there, too, though, is that eventually, through his powers and influence over Arakis, is that slowly the planet eventually turns back into more of a habitable environment, but it's to the detriment of the sandworms that themselves are the source of the spice that's so critical to the rest of the universe. But that's not till, like, way, way, way later in the story. Hopefully they'll get through Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, some of the later books, if things are successful enough. And it sounds like this new movie is going to do pretty well. Then they show you Paul meeting up with Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, earlier in the movie before they've left Caladan. Duncan is the House Atreides swordsman. You actually do get to see him do some really good sword work and fight scenes. All these fights that he has later in the trailer, that's from The Betrayal. But he also becomes Duke Leto's ambassador to the Fremen early in the movie when they first take control of Arrakis from House Harkonnen. Duke Leto had hoped to win over the Fremen people as the natives of Arrakis because of what had happened to them under House Harkonnen rule. Also because he very shrewdly felt like the Fremen knew a lot about the secrets of Arrakis that the rest of the universe did not know. So Duncan is only here for a little while early in the movie, then he comes back later after he's been with the Fremen for a long time. And also when Paul and Lady Jessica escape after the betrayal into the desert, Duncan is the one that offers them sanctuary with the Fremen. But early in the movie, Paul is just telling Duncan about his visions of the future of this girl that he's seeing on Arrakis, which he doesn't really understand yet. The whole reason why he has these abilities, though, is because he's part of this genetic breeding program that the Sisterhood had been orchestrating for a long time, hoping to create a series of alliances through marriage to eventually create a lasting peace between House Harkonnen and House Atreides, and eventually, much, much later down in the timeline, like way off in the future, eventually create a Kwisatz Haderach being that the Sisterhood could use to sort of exert more influence in the universe, in the Empire. They're already a very powerful organization in the Empire, but if they were able to control their own Kwisatz Haderach, who would do what they say, then they would be the greatest power in the universe. But earlier in the timeline here, their whole plan was for Lady Jessica, Paul's mother, to give Duke Leto a daughter and wed that daughter to one of Baron Harkonnen's sons, and use that as a way to create peace between their two houses. Because when the story picks up at the beginning of the movie, there's a lot of tension within the Landstrahd, which is basically like the group of noble houses in the universe that rule over the universe. The Duke has become really popular, really powerful. They developed this new military fighting technique called the Weirding Way, so the Emperor is really afraid that the Duke will try to depose him eventually. There's been a long-standing feud between House Harkonnen and House Atreides, so when the story picks up in the movie, the conflict between the three of them, the Baron, the Emperor, and the Duke, is sort of boiling over. But also on top of that, because Paul descended from the Sisterhood and he took the Water of Life, that's why he was able to become the Kwisatz Haderach. If he'd been any other normal person and taken the Water of Life, it would have just killed him. Like, normal people can't take the Water of Life. Watching the early part of the trailer here, if you've seen the 1984 Dune movie, a lot of this should look familiar. Paul being trained by Gurney Halleck, played by Josh Brolin, in the Weirding Way, the special sonic weaponry that House Atreides develops. It gives them a huge advantage in combat. They can use it to kill, like that's why he says in the original movie, kill with a word. They can also use it for defense, so eventually way later in the movie, after the betrayal and Paul and Lady Jessica join the Fremen, it seems like we actually see footage of him training them and them assaulting the Harkonnens using his new fighting techniques. This scene might look a little bit different, but it's the same scene of the Reverend Mother from the original movie coming to test Paul Atreides in the Gom Jabbar to test if he's an animal or a human. The whole idea is that they want to test him to see if he's going to turn into a monster. They're just not sure what he's going to become. They just know that because he descends from the Sisterhood, there is the potential for him to gain some of their powers, so they're kind of worried about that. So if he were to fail the test, eventually they would just have him killed. Is the process of using nerve induction to create the sensation of pain. When they do it to Paul, they're so afraid that he's going to turn into a monster that they crank it way up and they give him way more pain than anyone has ever been able to withstand before. Then you hear Duke Leto Atreides, played by Oscar Isaac, discussing their plan to bring peace to Arakis at the order of the Emperor. Secretly, this is obviously a trap set by the Emperor, who's working with House Harkonnen to get rid of the Duke and cripple House Atreides. Then they intercut the montage of a bunch of different scenes of Paul actually meeting Chani on Arakis later in the story, and they want you to see him having these visions of everything bad that's about to happen. This is Baron Harkonnen, played by Stellan Skarsgård. All these explosions are probably from the betrayal later in the film, everything going crazy later in the movie. This is when they first arrive on Arrakis and enter the fortress formerly occupied by House Harkonnen. They show you the Beast's men torturing all these people as Gurney, back on Caladan earlier in the movie, is trying to prepare Paul before they've left. Listen to Thanos, he's not lying, the Beast is brutal. This is the new version of Dr. Yui. He's an Imperial-trained physician working for the Duke's family. The black diamond in his forehead is just the mark of his Imperial conditioning given to him during his training as a doctor. He is obviously a huge part of the betrayal later in the film. And even though the Emperor is kind of pulling the strings behind all this the whole time, it's actually the Harkonnens that took his family and are using extortion and torture to get him to betray the Duke and his family. We get way more footage of the Baron, and after he says kill them all, this footage is from the actual Harkonnen attack during the betrayal itself. Then as Paul questions his future, what he's going to become earlier in the movie, talking to his father, the Duke, they cut it with the footage of the Sandworms sort of bowing to him later in the movie after he and Jessica have escaped to the desert, and the Sandworms can also sense who he is, what he's about to become. You also notice the design of the Sandworms is very different from the original film. The production design in the movie just in general looks amazing. A lot of it's inspired by the original concept art from the Dune books. They're trying to be a little bit more accurate to the look that was described in the original books. This fight with Paul is happening really early after Duncan first offers them sanctuary with the Fremen right after they've escaped to the desert. Then it looks like we actually get to see Paul leading some raids on the Harkonnens later in the movie after he's been living with the Fremen for a while, but before he's taken the Water of Life. Like after he joins the Fremen, he starts to train them in the secret House Atreides battle techniques. But then when Lady Jessica says, it's time at the end, that's a reference to a couple different things, but the way they use it in the trailer, they want you to think that it's a reference to him taking the Water of Life and truly becoming the Kwisatz Haderach. So like I said, that might be around the time where they end this first new film, but they basically have the whole next film planned out, and if you've seen the original David Lynch Dune movie, basically they do the story of the second book, which is the rest of the story of that film. The movie's out October 22nd, both on HBO Max and on theaters in the same day, so if you are able, I would recommend that you see this on the biggest screen possible. If you spotted any big Easter eggs or references during the trailer that I didn't mention in the video, just write them below in the comments. This is obviously just the beginning. It's like this whole big story. Pretty much every big science fiction story, including Star Wars, borrows a lot of inspiration from the original Dune book series. It's the same way that a lot of modern fantasy stories borrow from Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings books. I believe there's supposed to be a new Spider-Man No Way Home trailer sometime relatively soon, and a new Venom Let There Be Carnage trailer, so make sure you have alerts enabled for my channel so you don't miss anything. Everyone click here for that brand new Loki Season 2 teaser and all the deleted scenes of Kang, and click here for all my Loki episode videos. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys tonight. The spice must flow.